Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I'm your host, Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the owner and operator of Something Wicked Entertainment and Events. And welcome to this podcast that comes out every Wednesday at 8 a.m., right on the dot. If you've been with us for a while, you know that what we do is we kind of take a single film, a horror film of different decades, different genres, subgenres, and we kind of sit back and talk about it. It could be a critical analysis of it. It could simply be our way of analyzing it personally, or it could simply be telling you exactly how entertaining and fun this movie is. But every episode of the show is different because my special guests are different. And with each special guest, they have a different ideal on the film that we're talking about. So, with today's film, I might as well say it is Nosferatu, the Vampire from 1979, I believe. And what we're doing is we are discussing this film, the Werner Herzog version. Now, not the silent film version and not the most recent Roger Eggers version, but the Werner Herzog version. And to talk about this version with me is Thomas Tenerello. I want to thank Thomas for joining us. Say hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. And also, to be clear, we're also not talking about the one with Doug Jones in it.
There's one with Doug Jones in it?
Yes, there is. It's on Tubi, and it is awful.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, we're not going to talk about the possible sequel, which is Nosferatu in Venice, which also starred Klaus Kinski.
Dude, you buried my lead. I was going to mention that at the very end. Thanks, Kevin.
I just happened to see it on Tubi, and it's on my list to watch. And now, after I'm watching this one, I need to go back. I need to go and watch that one because I've never seen that one.
Me neither. Me neither. And I have no desire to. From what I've read about it, I'm like, I don't want to watch Klaus Kinski rape another woman on film because that's what it sounds like.
But the thing is, I like Klaus Kinski.
I do too.
Actor, and I've liked most of what he's done for Werner Herzog. Some of the stuff he's done not for Werner Herzog, I don't really, I'm iffy about, but most of the stuff he's done for him, I absolutely loved. And, one of the reasons why we're talking about this film is because Thomas actually suggested it, not only because of the remake, but also because it was a remake of the original Nosferatu. What was it? Symphony? I can't remember the title of the original.
It is called Nosferatu, A Symphony of Terror.
Symphony of Terror.
by F.W. Murnau, famously lampooned in Shadow of the Vampire, starring Willem Dafoe.
Yep. Which I absolutely love that movie.
That is a great movie.
Yeah.
That is a great movie, yeah.
But I'm also a huge F.W. Murnau fan, just like I am with Werner Herzog.
So in that case, I just want to real quick ask you, like, he did Nosferatu. What else did F.W. Murnau do? I know he did like a version of Faust. What else is he known for?
He did Faust. He did Sunset. I have to look it up because I'm slowly but surely acquiring all of his films. Because the thing is, it's really hard to get them. My versions are like Sunrise. I've seen. I actually really loved Sunrise, and Taboo. I've seen. I really love that one. City Girl, another good one. I have not seen. I think it's The Burning Soil. I've not seen that one.
Never heard of it.
But a lot of Tartuffe is good too. That's long, but it's good. The Last Laugh, a lot of people out there may have seen or heard of. And then Phantom is really good too. I think I did an F.W. Murnau tribute weekend for Something Wicked Entertainment or Film Festival, and we tackled Phantom. The Haunted Castle, also another one. But Nosferatu is the most well-known one. He did a lot of films, but the thing is, a lot of his films were all silent films. So,
some of them were almost destroyed.
Yeah, some of them were like
Nosferatu.
Yeah, or you can't get really good versions of them.
Oh yeah,
for the longest
time. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was about to say a lot of my versions are not really good versions. I found a lot of versions just so I could see them. because I want to see his work. I mean, I love his Nosferatu. That's one of my favorite silent films is Nosferatu. And I studied that one in film class. Oh God, that was so long ago.
I am glad you mentioned film class, because that is kind of not where I was first exposed to this version, but it was where I first kind of I must have suggested it to my professor, because I had seen it, I think, or at least pieces of it on like extended cable, like Flicks or something, or it may have been, I'm not 100% positive, but it may have also been on Creature Feature with Dr. Paul Bearer, our the St. Pete, Florida's horror host that I mentioned before. I'm not sure. It's one of those. But I literally said you should watch something by Werner Herzog, and oh, now I know what it is. I didn't convince him to make the class watch it. What I did was he let me write a paper on it. So I wrote a freaking college term paper on this movie, Nosferatu, der Vampyre, or as in German it's called Phantom der Nacht.
My story's a little funnier, I guess, because I came across this film by accident because I used to collect the Anchor Bay releases that were in the clamshells, and I got this from that, not knowing what I was getting into when I bought it. And so when I watched it, that's how I finally realized who the hell Werner Herzog was and who Klaus Kinski was, because I had seen Klaus Kinski in other films. One of my favorite B movies is Creature. I had seen him before, but I didn't know his name. But after watching this, I started to realize who these people were. Isabella Adjani, and who I think Possession was the movie I liked her in, and some of the other films, which I still enjoy that one with her more than this one. But
it's hard to beat.
If I hadn't seen this film, I probably would not be as big a Werner Herzog fan as I am. I've seen almost every one of Werner Herzog's films. I went through a deep dive and kind of sat down and watched every one of his films that I had never seen, and I realized that dude did a lot of fucking films, and he still does a lot of movies.
He's almost like 80 something, and he's still working, and I love that about him.
Same here. Now, I won't say that all of his films are great, but I will say that every one of his films never feels like another one of his films. They're all freaking different. It's like
and yet they all feel like there's something Herzog-y about them. Like even his more modern commercial, quote unquote, movies like Rescue Dawn, and the other remake that he did, which is Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans.
Which is so funny that he did that movie.
I know, right? With Nicolas freaking Cage doing his most Nick Cagey performance ever.
Yeah, but you know what? That film isn't that bad.
It's not. It's great.
Not that bad. I was like, oh my God. And that's why I love his work so much. Like, there's some he's done some amazing work. And when I rewatched this, now, everyone out there who's a huge fan of this film, do not want to hang me right now. When I did my first review on this film years ago, I gave this a 9 out of 10 stars. It did something to me other than I recognized who Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski were, and there is no denying that. But when I rewatched it, having seen so many other of his films, I didn't enjoy it as much. The one thing I really, really love, I still love to this day about this film, is the fucking score. The score for this film is freaking phenomenal. And I remember making notes of that when I originally watched it decades ago. But when I rewatched it, I was like, shit, that score still is fucking awesome in this movie.
It's very similar in a sense that, and how the score is constructed, it's very similar, kind of like, it's kind of like a Fulci movie in the sense that your composer really only writes about 4 songs and just plays them over and over again.
Yeah, but
with the exception though that there is at least 2, maybe 1 or 2 compositions in this by the great composer Richard Wagner.
Yeah.
So this movie is very, very German, especially if you watch it in the German version, which I could not.
Yeah, I couldn't either. When I've never seen that version, my Anchor Bay version. And for anyone who was stupid enough to own both of them back in the day, Anchor Bay did a version of the German version and the English version. I didn't ever get the German version, and then when I rewatched it on my DVD, my DVD is just the English version only. It doesn't have the German version, so I still haven't seen the German version.
Yeah, I have the Blu-ray that has both versions on it, a commentary by Herzog, which I wish I made the time to sit down and listen to that, because for those of you who don't know out there, film fans, Werner Herzog is one of the most often imitated voices in all of movie history. Especially just listen to his freaking documentaries, because he always narrates his documentaries, and he always has this dreaming, dreary, intoning voice.
Yeah,
where you're looking at a volcano and staring into the abyss, and the abyss will stare back at you, and you will realize you've seen a friend in there. Things like that.
That's pretty good. That's actually pretty good.
Oh, you'll hear much more from Mr. Herzog later, I'm sure. So let's talk a little bit. So I guess we're gonna have an interesting conversation about this then, Mr. Kevin. If you have so I'll just put my cards out there on the table before we get into the backgrounds on the artists who contributed to this thing that exists, this thing that I love. This movie that honestly, and now I think there's half the audience probably going to kill Kevin, but the other half of the audience probably want to kill me, because here's my hot take. I actually prefer this movie to the original F.W. Murnau Nosferatu. I have seen it, and I didn't like it as much. I mean, I appreciate it. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate the vision of F.W. Murnau. I appreciate the genius, and I probably would agree with Werner Herzog himself, who said that F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu is one of the greatest German films ever made, ever. And I agree. It's probably the greatest thing Germany ever did that didn't involve Nazis. But yeah, it's boy, I hope I said that right. I said didn't, not did. It didn't. Okay. So, but yeah, I think the other half, I prefer this to that. It's not that I don't like silent movies. I love silent movies. Like Paul Theodore Dreyer's Passion of Joan of Arc is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Fucking brilliant. I love that movie.
Exactly. And another thing I love about Murnau's version is that it proves, along with Fritz Lang's Metropolis, that the genre movies endure for so long and so much more, I think, than other genres. I mean, comedies, taste and humor can change sometimes.
Yeah.
Unless it's like slapstick, like a Charlie Chaplin movie will never not be funny. A Buster Keaton movie, will never not be funny, because every culture all over the world understands that kind of humor and always will. Mm-hmm. But look at these two movies from the silent era. Most people who've never even watched a silent movie, just ask them, hey, can you name a silent movie? They might not even seen either of those movies, and they'll be like Nosferatu or Metropolis. Yeah. Can we say that about almost anything else these days? I don't know. Probably not. Can you imagine, in 100 years, we've gone beyond so much? Actually, no. Those two movies are more than 100 years old by now, I think. Wow.
Yeah, I have to look at dates now. You're getting silent films. Yeah.
I think the original came out in
1922.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And contrary to popular belief, it was not the first Dracula adaptation. There are at least 4 or 5 others that we know of, none of which have survived.
Yeah, well, back then they didn't want to say it was a Dracula adaptation either. So.
Because they're going to get sued by Bram Stoker's widow, which is another thing that makes this movie different from Egger's version and any other version of this story, is that it is the only version that kind of attempts to be a synergy between Murnau's version and Bram Stoker's book. Mm-hmm. No other version does that. Even frickin' Robert Eggers didn't do that. This is the only version in movie history where Count Dracula has a white bald head and tiny bat teeth and the long, sharp fingers. and the white skin. This is the only version that has that. The only version where you have that vision, that silhouette, and his name is Count Dracula.
Yeah.
And it's also the only other version where you have all the character names, even though some of them are switched for weird freaking reasons I don't understand. And what's even weirder is that he's not the only one who does this, but we'll get into that. It's really strange. I mean, there's a Van Helsing in this movie, and he's useless. He does nothing.
Yeah.
I love that Van Helsing is useless in this movie.
Well, I had to remember that. I was like, oh, yeah, he is Van Helsing, because they mentioned it at the very end of the movie. Oh, yeah, he just doesn't do anything.
He doesn't do anything. Yeah, the real main character of this movie is Isabella Gianni's Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
Which, really, her name should be Mina, but we'll get into that. But anyway, she's great in this movie. I mean, she's not as good as Possessor, because that's a possession. Yes. Sorry. That was a freaking one-time thing for the ages. I don't know. She must have sometime. I don't know. Maybe she might have been like having a psychotic break during that movie. I don't know. But anyway,
I mean, her and Sam Neill, they were both.
Poor Sam Neill. Yeah, he has to. Oh man, maybe one day we'll do that movie. I still haven't seen it all the way through. I've only watched the beginning, and I had to go to bed. and I didn't want nightmares of hentai tentacle stuff happening. Anyway, Werner Herzog. For those of you out there who do not know who Werner Herzog is, I figure we should do a little bit of background, because let's face it, this is probably the only time Conversations in Horror is ever going to be talking about Werner Herzog, because this is his only horror movie. I wish he would do another one, but he's doing a lot of documentaries these days.
Yeah, he's done a lot of documentaries. And which was one of the great things about having the Netflix DVD. That's how I was able to see most of his movies, because they produced them on DVD, and I didn't have to wait for a streaming service to actually get the rights for them. That's what I loved about the Netflix DVD. I was able to get those type of movies that no streaming service was streaming. So, and now that Ed's gone, finding those hard to get movies like that is just really fucking hard. Now I have to go out and buy them. Yeah, or you have to order them online, which that's where it's going these days. But like Herzog, he's kind of slowly become one of my favorite filmmakers for many reasons. Not least of which the fact that when they had that masterclass deal going on, he was one of the guys I took. I took David Lynch and I took Werner Herzog, and both of those were some of them. I think I took Scorsese's class too. So those are the three directors. Technically, Jodie Foster's a director now too, so I took hers. She was really good too, surprisingly, very, very helpful. But Herzog, I mean, even if you're not at all interested in directing, like find a bootleg copy of his interview segments from his masterclass, because he has all sorts of fun. Much of it has been like made into quotes. Like, for instance, my favorite one is where he talks about like the necessity or lack thereof of being culturally savvy. He says he basically said that he doesn't even watch movies that much. Like, he maybe watch like one or two or three a year, but that's it. Most of the time he spends reading epic poetry, he says. And then occasionally, if I want to remind myself what kind of world I live in, I just turn on WrestleMania. It's literally what he says. And I'm like, that is the most Werner Herzogian thing I've ever heard. This is a guy who I think we would call a ignorant artist. And we don't mean that in a derogatory sense. Herzog studied opera, theater, all sorts of esoteric stuff in Munich, where he grew up. And then at some point, he never finished his degree. He just up and said, nuts to that, and just followed and created his own production company in the early 60s. I don't know where he got the money to do it, but he did. Wow. But so that's how he started making movies. He made his own company, and he just started churning stuff out. At first he did just shorts, and he graduated to documentary short subjects, and then to regular documentaries. Then he started making features like Even Dwarfs Started Small. Yep. Which is, in fact, about dwarves in an institution. It is a movie. It exists. I don't know what it is because I haven't watched it, but I just thought that's a great title. You should watch it. Like I said, it was on DVD. It was on Netflix DVD. I was able to watch almost everything he ever put out on Netflix DVD.
And that one was quite good, you think?
The thing is, he has this weird visual sense.
Oh yes, we'll get into that.
And that's what's so captivating. Like, there's a lot of films where you might get bored. I'm trying to think of the one with him. I think it was with Brad Dourif, which may bore you to sleep, but just watching it is captivating because it's like, why the fuck did either one of these do this film? This is such an odd thing.
Yeah, I mean, like the first thing that came out, I think, brought him to international acclaim was the movie he made like 2 years after Even Dwarfs Start Small, which is probably my favorite of his movies so far, is Aguirre, The Wrath of God, which was probably the first time he ever worked with Klaus Kinski, the star of this movie as well. Although he is dubbed in Aguirre, Wrath of God, not with his own voice. Because Kinski refused to come back and dub his own dialogue post-sync for that movie. He did for this movie, both versions, thankfully. But yeah, Aguirre, The Wrath of God is my favorite because it's like the most hypnotic and bizarre historical epics you will ever see that features a severed head that has dialogue. And it's not a horror movie. It's pretty amazing. And Klaus Kinski finishes the whole movie by delivering a monologue to a bunch of monkeys on a floating barge.
I thought that was a really captivating movie. I thought I saw that one. You might as well just say I saw all of his movies because of Netflix DVD. This is like one big fucking advertisement for the old defunct Netflix DVD. Because when I went deep diving, I was able to get all of them, or at the time, all of them. He was and even when you watch these films now, these films are period films, and they don't feel like your cookie cutter type of films. Like, they have this weird poetry to them, and that's the same way with Nosferatu. There's this weird poetry to them that kind of captivates you. And sometimes it's in the dialogue, and sometimes it's in the visuals. And when you're watching them, you're just captivated and not just entertained, but you can't take your eyes off of it some of the times.
No, yeah. I mean, he trances you. He puts you in a trance.
That's a good word.
Yes, he trances you. And I love how, if you look at his page on IMDb, it says writer, director, producer, poet. And he is that. He is all of that. In fact, I love the fact that I learned this in his masterclass, is that he never really learned how to write a screenplay. I mean, his writing process is like, he just writes his movies in prose. Especially in the early 70s, he just wrote all of those movies, even Nosferatu, as a prose novel that's written in the present tense and is purely visual. He never gets inside any other character's head. So he writes it kind of like a Dashiell Hammett novel in that regard. So he just writes that and then makes a shot list from that. So I wish I could get a hold of, one of those, especially the one for this movie that he did, because he read excerpts from it, and the descriptions are just so intense and beautiful. Like, I wish he'd taken some of that and just did some of his narration. They made it narration in this movie. I think that there's parts of this movie that almost would benefit from the Herzogian narration, just like there for no reason. It might be interesting. But yeah, I love his process, and it makes me go, wow, there's no right way to make a movie, is there? You can do whatever.
And that's one of the things that, that's one of the things that I like about this film, but I also hate. But the thing is, and that's why I probably gave it a 9 when I originally watched it. I was in my film school mentality, and I'm like, oh my God, this is a fucking amazing movie. This is blew my mind. Because I was put in that trance, and I was like, holy shit. And I was captivated. I think what has colored my opinions now is the fact that I've seen so much of his stuff now that it's now become what I'm used to seeing in his works. Whereas when I first saw that was literally the first time I ever seen one of Herzog's films.
Yeah, I guess what you're talking about is kind of the same experience somebody would have when they first hear a song by what would become their favorite band. You hear that one song from them and you love that song and you think, wow, this is great. And then you listen to every other song they've done And obviously this is the same for every band out there. There's bands that are versatile over the years, but sometimes you listen to one song and then you're like, oh, wow, all their songs kind of sound like that one thing that I loved, and now that one thing that I loved is not as special anymore.
Yeah,
So maybe that's what it is.
yeah. I think that's exactly what it is. Because I found this film visually phenomenal throughout the whole film, just like I did the music. Like he uses daylight so much in this film, and he uses the locations. There are beautiful locations. Like this is Dracula, but the locations are all beautifully shot. They're all daylight. Even Count Dracula has this pale complexion, but it's not dirty or grimy. It's actually very clean, and it glows in the sun. I'm like, dude, I'm rewatching this film. Is like, this is not like a grungy vampire film. This is a beautifully shot, like you said, like poetry. Like he was like putting me in a trance when I'm watching.
There's times where when he's in the castle in the beginning, there are shots where, like when he's talking with Harker about the property in England, where he's just kind of slinking against the wall, which is also black, and it looks like his white head is just floating in the darkness.
Yeah,
I mean, supposedly, the makeup that Klaus Kinski had to sit in the chair for 4 hours every day to get on, including the fake ears, which he also hated. Apparently, the man, for those of y'all who don't know, Klaus Kinski was a legendary raging monster in real life. He was very hard to control and did horrible things to people, especially women. But he was uncharacteristically well behaved when he was getting in the makeup. Apparently, he just sat there and took it. Part of it was because apparently he really liked the makeup lady, who would fling jokes back and forth in German with him. Like he really had a good time with this lady who I guess he did not sexually assault, but yeah, he took it. He just did it, and he never ripped off the makeup or anything. But apparently, like, he thought the makeup was so effective that whenever he would catch a glimpse of himself in the makeup, he couldn't look at himself. He actually didn't banned mirrors from the set. He didn't want to see himself because he was that disturbed by it, which is wild.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, a little bit of background on Kinski himself as an actor and a person that I found interesting that I didn't know, the fact that he was drafted into the German army in 1944 and fought on that side in World War II before being captured by British forces. So I guess he was a sucky soldier, and he was put in military prison in Holland, and then started acting shortly after the war ended. So he was not a Nazi, but close.
Oh, geez. Well, he's just a regular soldier.
Yeah. Speaking of assault, let's talk about Isabella Gianni for a second, because she is the third triumvirate in this. I mean, we'll talk about Bruno Ganz as well, because he does make a bit of a contribution to this, and he's in one of my favorite scenes in this movie. Okay. But Isabella Gianni, half German, half Algerian, all talent, but grew up in France, so that's how she's famous, for being in French movies and also occasionally in weird Polish movies like Possession and weird German French co-productions like this movie. She just did everything, and I don't know. It's hard to compare her to modern actors now, because she did so many different kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And she do something like this, which is so understated, and something like Possession, which is not. So I don't know. I guess maybe you could say she's kind of like the Nick Cage of actresses in France. She'll do award-winning prestige stuff, like the story of Adele H, where she played the daughter of Victor Hugo.
I haven't seen that yet. That's on my list.
Yeah, I hear it's very good. And then she'll turn around and do this movie. So we mentioned before also that to do this movie you had to be bilingual, and she's trilingual. She speaks French, German, Speaks German fluently because that was her mother's maiden language or something, and English, obviously. So this is a French-German co-production that has two versions in English and German, not in French, which is interesting to me. Anyway, but they chose for distribution's sake, I guess they chose having those two versions. And actually, Herzog has been doing this for a while because he did Gary the Wrath of God the same way. He shot every scene twice, once in English, once in German. And if the person in the cast didn't know how to speak English or German, they just spoke whatever language they could speak, and they dubbed them later because he post-synced all his sound anyway, kind of like Fulci does and Argento and all the Italians did. But, you know, almost everybody on this film was fluent in English and German, and apparently, and they just shot everything one right after the other, kind of similar, but not really, to how the original Dracula was shot in English and Spanish, except with a different cast.
Yeah.
So there's that similarity. But also, the German version is a little different. There are subtle differences, and I think maybe there's some performance differences. One of the major differences that I know of is that Renfield is a little different in the German version. He's a bit more restrained.
Yeah, he's not restrained in this one, which I actually found really funny when I rewatched it. I was like, damn, Renfield's fucked up in the very first scene he's in.
Yeah, he just goes from crazy to crazier.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I had forgotten that, obviously.
What's cool about that scene? But what was cool about that scene though is like, I don't think I've ever seen another version of this where Renfield starts the plot. He is Jonathan Harker's boss.
Yeah,
he sends Harker, played by Bruno Ganz, to Transylvania to oversee a land purchase for this wealthy nobleman named Count Dracula, and he points to a map saying, "There, Transylvania, beyond the forest," which is funny. And yes, make no mistake, this movie at times is hilarious.
Yeah,
Werner Herzog's dry sense of humor is very prevalent in this movie if you're paying attention. Because when he says Transylvania beyond the forest, I found out today Transylvania the word means beyond the forest. That's what it literally means. So beyond literally he's saying beyond the forest.
I'm sure he knew that too when he wrote that.
Oh yeah, I'll bet. But also, like, we were talking about the music earlier, and the very first images of this movie are super arresting and always stuck out to me before we get to that scene, which is, it's mostly just this long documentary style handheld, but there's a lot of handheld shots in this movie, of this long catacomb of mummies.
Yeah.
Mummified, shrieking, seemingly corpses of men, women, and babies and children, which apparently they're all real. These are all mummies in a museum in central Mexico that Herzog himself went to and shot all that stuff himself.
Oh, I was thinking that he might have shot some of this stuff in the catacombs of France. But,
nope. Okay. This was in Mexico. Actually, according to IMDb, Herzog is one of the only filmmakers who has literally made a movie on every continent in the world. But the music is this haunting male choir. Sounds like a bunch of monks in a Gothic cathedral are intoning this trance-like piece, which is called Brother of Darkness by a composer whose name I cannot pronounce. But it gets in your head, and just when you think it's done, guess what? You're going to hear it again later, and it's going to get in your brain again and again and again. And I never get sick of it. I never get sick of it. Yeah. I never get sick of it. And also, like, they play the whole thing pretty much. Although if you listen to it on Spotify, it has a beautiful kind of arc to it. Like, it starts off in the dark, dreary dream world, and it kind of has like the arc of the movie in a way. It's at the end, it sounds almost like the sun is coming up. Oh, so it's really interesting if you listen to the whole piece on Spotify. But after that long shot of mummies, there's the bats. And this movie has one thing that other Dracula movies never get right. this movie has no fake bats. Herzog doesn't mess around with that. These are all real freaking bats in this movie. There's an authenticity to what Herzog does. He demands real freaking bats. So there is a green tinted slow motion shot of a bat coming from the top of the frame down to the bottom of the frame, like it's descending upon us. And Isabella Gianni wakes up from a nightmare. We don't know what is in the nightmare, whether it's the bat or the mummies or both. I like to imagine it was the mummies and then the bat, because that's what he showed us. But apparently, by the way, that bat footage that he keeps using over and over again was actually just documentary footage that they used from a nature movie.
I can see that.
Speaking of animals, the very next thing we see that I don't understand why. Maybe you have a theory.
Okay.
But like the next thing we see is the beautiful like daylight credits, and we see Lucy Harker and Jonathan Harker, their house in, we assume, England, but no, this movie's version is set in Weimar, Germany. Although he shot this part in the Netherlands. But there's kittens everywhere. Kittens just like attacking her little locket that's open on the bookshelf, and they're just like, by the way, I love kittens. I don't know why there's kittens attacking her image.
Because by the end of the movie, there aren't no kittens. There's just rats everywhere.
Yes. Maybe the rats ate the cats. That would be weird. I wish he'd shot that, but he probably would have got in trouble with the SPCA. Wow. But anyway, that necklace, that cameo necklace, to me, I feel like is what we call in the echelons of like screenwriting classes, they call it a marvelous and terrible object. Which is to say, it's an object that has tremendous plot and thematic importance. An object that becomes something that the characters place their, like, it represents something deep within their soul. And for this, I think, if you jump ahead a little bit, we find out that when Dracula says to Harker, he wants to buy this property in Weimar, you get the impression, he never says why, but you get the impression that it's almost out of boredom, because he keeps talking on and on about how horrible it would be to live night after night, living over and over again. Can you imagine? But then he sees the locket, and he sees her throat. What a lovely throat. And then from that moment on, he's like, give me the contract. I don't care how much it costs. I'm going to freaking... He signs the contract. And from then on, Dracula has a drive. Dracula has a goal. Dracula has one thing. He wants to see Lucy, and he wants to have her. But interestingly, he will not have her unless she consents. Another thing that's weird about this movie is that, again, jumping ahead a bit, he doesn't come to her for that climactic scene at the end where he comes to her bed and bites her neck until she lets him. I mean, yeah, you could say that's kind of a variation of the whole a vampire can't enter your house unless you invite them in, but it gives this character, Lucy, such agency in this plot. And it becomes like this very kind of feminist, story in a way. And in a way, I think probably that gave Robert Eggers some ideas, from what I understand. Because from what I understand, that character's analog in his version, the whole movie is pretty much from her point of view. And we've jumped around point of views in this version, but I think it's pretty clear that Herzog sympathizes with Lucy a whole lot more.
Yes, because even when Harker gets back home, he's more or less a non-character for the rest of the movie till the very, very, very end.
Oh, yeah. Well, you think about it, too, is that, like, when Harker goes to Transylvania, which, by the way, geography in this movie is really weird.
Because it takes 4 weeks to get there.
That's what they tell us. But I think that might be BS. Because here's the thing. All right. He gets on a horse. And since they're not in England anymore, he doesn't have to get on a boat to go to Transylvania. Because he's in Germany now, in Weimar. So all he has to do is get on a horse, which you see him do, and it doesn't seem, the way Herzog edits it, it doesn't seem like a very long trip. We find out later it's 4 weeks, but it doesn't seem that long at all. He goes through the woods. He goes to the mountains. He meets a village of Romany, excuse me, and by the way, knowing Herzog, these are probably all real Romany people. These are not actors.
Yeah.
So they have this authenticity to them, and he does the usual beats for that. You shouldn't go to that castle, da da da. But there's some interesting things they talk about there. One of the things they talk about is how the castle doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
They keep telling him there's no such castle. He's like, what do you mean there's no such castle? It's right there, Castle Dracula. He's like, no, you don't understand. This castle exists only in a world of phantoms, where everyone who goes there never returns.
Except for gypsies.
There's like 2 or 3 guys who look like they've got 1,000-mile stare who have been there. I mean, so technically to me that says, and mild spoilers, folks, that when Jonathan Harker goes there to that land of phantoms, true to the fatalistic intonations of that villager, in a sense, in spite of everything, he never really does return. Because when he does return, let's just say he's not himself anymore.
No.
So we'll get back to that. But Harker is played, like we said, by Bruno Ganz.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very famous German actor.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite scene with him, I mentioned earlier, is with him and Klaus Kinski's Dracula, which, again, we've talked about Kinski as a person. We haven't talked about how Kinski's performance in this movie is amazing and probably isn't like anything else he's done. Because I can't think of, maybe I'm wrong, but because he's done a lot of movies before he died in 1989. I don't think Kinski ever disappeared into a part like he did in this one. I mean, some of it is the makeup, but some of it is just like the physicality. I mean, Kinski was a big guy.
Yeah.
But you look at him and he is shrunken. He's so folded into himself. He's so like a vulture almost, with a long hung over neck and his arms kind of folded over each other, and his long fingernails with the long plastic nails draping like a weeping willow. And you just, like, after a while, if you're not looking at his eyes, you forget that it's him. Kind of like how Defoe did in Shadow of the Vampire. And, of course, rumor has it that Herzog got Kinski to get that kind of melancholic kind of mood, or if you could say that, by doing something he did to him on Aguirre, the Wrath of God, which is basically scream at kids Klaus Kinski, get into a fight with him, basically, and get him exhausted after take after take after take. And so what you see in this final movie is probably take 16, when Kinski is just completely exhausted and has been defeated in a battle of wills with Werner Herzog. Because Herzog always won those battles and just printed those takes. He did the same thing in Aguirre, Wrath of God, where Kinski wanted to be just freaking like Nick Caging it all over the place, basically. But he just tired Kinski out, and so that's the subdued performance he gives in Aguirre. So he's even more subdued in this version. Sometimes he's positively sleepwalking, but in a good way. Which is, I never thought I'd say. Yeah, because there are times where he's just kind of slowly kind of floating through the castle corridors and lit in such a way that he just feels so dreamlike and weird. And his eyes are just like these vacant pools of gray and white. It's so eerie. And in color. I forgot. This movie has a great color scheme to it. Where
it does. That's what I was about to say. Klaus Kinski looks amazing as Count Dracula in this movie. I mean, he doesn't look like he's like the bringer of the plague. He looks like a gentleman who just happens to have a bald head and some teeth and some sharp claws. It's a very different look than in the Murnau version. It's very similar. It's very different.
Oh yeah, he humanizes the Count a whole lot more. Like the the Murnau version, he's a freaking demon. Yeah. I mean, who would ever want to be in the presence of that thing? I don't know. Mm-hmm. But this poor guy, I mean, when he's talking with Lucy and talking with like other people, he almost seems like, aw, I think the term for it is, oh, it's a wooby. It's like a, I can change him. I mean, he's not like a magnetic sex machine, like like Bela Lugosi, or a a highborn like English gentleman like Christopher Lee. He's his own thing, and that thing works really well.
Yeah.
And speaking of Harker, of course, I thought it was funny how, like, before everything starts, like, of course, Lucy tells him, as all great women of horror do, "Don't go to Transylvania. Don't go, please. I have a terrible feeling something bad is going to happen." Which, of course, is the universal truth of horror movies that says, "Listen to your wife. Listen to your wife."
Now you bring up something I wanted to bring up because from the very moment we first see Lucy in this film, she has almost like a supernatural second sense when it comes to danger. And it's throughout the whole film. She's always seeing Jonathan in this weird type of danger. She's trying to tell him not to go to Transylvania to meet with Count Dracula. And throughout the whole film, she has these nightmare sequences about this count or this figure or count. I can't remember if she actually says what's coming, but she knows. She has like a second sight with it, which is not a characteristic of any other Lucy / Mina character in any other Dracula that I recall.
From what I understand, yeah, not any other Draculas, but from what I understand, it sounds like that's kind of what Robert Eggers was pulling from in his version of that character in his version of Nosferatu, except he goes way, way, way beyond that and actually legitimately has her be basically a medium and have all these kind of psychic powers. And this one's a bit more subtle, where it seems like what this couple lacks in emotional intimacy, they seem to gain in like a psychic connection. When he's getting, which is kind of sort of heartbreaking in a subtle way, when he slowly descends into what he descends into. And like, I mean, like, even when he's about to get bit on the neck, she wakes up and she feels it happen. I also think it's funny that her accent kind of causes the name to have all sorts of funny funny variations. She can never really call him Jonathan. She always calls him Gelatin or Gelafon.
I don't think I noticed that.
which is exactly what I'm going to start calling him from now on. Whenever I refer to Jonathan Harker, I'm going to say Gelatin, because it's hilarious.
Oh my god. That's the dubbing part.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, again, Lucy, if those of you who are fans of the book Dracula will know that, wait a minute, that is not the main character of the book. If you're going to take the book and use the book, do it right. Well, he didn't. For whatever stupid reason, he decided to switch the names of the two female protagonists in this movie. So instead of Mina, it is Lucy, and they're doing the same kind of thing. But, it wouldn't be so weird if it weren't for the fact that the same year, another Dracula movie came out that did the exact same freaking thing.
Yeah, what was the other one?
Dracula 79, starring Frank Langella.
Okay. Yeah, which I've also seen that one. I'd like to say there was another Dracula that did that, and I thought it was weird too. I just couldn't remember which one it was.
Yeah, I don't know why. I maybe I'll say on the Werner Herzog commentary, I don't know why he decided to do it that way. But, like, again, this is a weird amalgam of adaptations in this movie. But mark my words, it is definitely a Herzog movie.
Yeah.
But, I mean, also, like, the journey Harker takes up the Transylvania mountains is like this weird kind of spiritual ascension. It's like he's Moses going to meet God. And the clouds, the way Herzog films clouds, is like a spiritual kind of thing. I think he does this, the whole like sped up cloud time lapse and slow down. Mm-hmm. That technique wasn't very used. It wasn't in use that much back in the early 70s. Late 70s when he finally did it. So he was kind of doing some interesting experimental stuff there, which I think is cool.
Yeah, but also taking the fact that a lot of these sequences are almost all in the daylight. Until he actually gets to the castle. When he's on the road and he's picked up by the carriage at night, was like the first time that we actually see a lot of this stuff at night. And because obviously he's now gotten to someone who will take him to Dracula's castle. Which is weird at first because I kept thinking there was going to be something more supernatural. But to be honest with you, it's just a carriage that's empty that's taking him to the castle.
Yeah, and
So
also that carriage was a real funeral carriage.
oh,
According to IMDb, that is just a like a specialty funeral carriage that rich people in Germany would like use, like to have a fancy old timey gothic looking funeral. They would hire this guy's carriage and take him to take their loved ones to the cemetery.
okay.
So wild, real carriage, real funeral carriage. That guy is probably really used to carrying coffins.
Wait, I'm going to bring this up early because if I don't, I'm going to forget it. Because I found this hilarious. You may not find it as hilarious to me, but I did find it hilarious that when the Demeter finally gets to land at night, when Dracula's leaving the Demeter to go to his new home, he's just carrying these 3 coffins with his earth in it. He looks around, make sure no one's watching, and it's very slow and deliberate turning around too.
Yeah.
And then he walks off, slinking with the first coffin. I'm like, which is really cool visually because you see the shadows and all that type of stuff. Plays really well with background because it's supposed to be dark nighttime. I was like, yeah, see, this is why visually this is an amazing film. I just wasn't, when I rewatched it, I wasn't stuck on the story nearly as much. And that's one of the things about Werner Herzog movies. I'm not really always stuck on the story. In fact, sometimes I forget what the story is, but I remember a lot of the visuals for his movies.
Oh yeah. I feel like this movie excels in the quiet moments between scenes and sequences where that song Brotherhood of Darkness or Brother of Darkness comes in and there's like a montage of, say, the Demeter sailing through the ocean while Harker's huffing it on a horse. Why he doesn't try to get there by boat too, I don't know, but he tries to outrun a boat, which apparently Dracula says we have to be much faster to get there by boat. I don't see how, but okay. Again, geography's weird in this movie. And when the boat does come in the daylight, Lucy, just before that, she's there sitting waiting for poor Jeniton to show up, and she's sitting in a beach cemetery. Mm-hmm. With beautiful shot that is one of the only times where Herzog is actually literally imitating a shot from the original Murnau movie, but he does it in his own kind of way that looks like a painting that only he could do it that way. But then the very next thing, the ship comes in and she's just kind of looking listlessly out the window, and you can see the shadow of the ship come across her face.
But it's because it's coming into an empty town. Really slowly.
Yes.
Like it's creeping into the city.
Yeah, and it's real. It's a real ship. It's a real friggin' ship.
And then it just slightly bumps.
Boom.
Just boom.
Yeah.
Like if you, I don't know if you could do that in this modern day era. When Herzog was doing this film, you can get away with that because it was such an artistic visual style that he was bringing to this film.
Well, apparently it wasn't easy for him to get away with either, because, like, from what I understand, he tried to shoot this in Weimar, and I'm sure the Weimar government probably read the script and said, "No way, we're letting you do this. We're not going to let you flood our city with freaking rats." So, but apparently in the Netherlands, it's just fine with a bunch of painted rats running around.
Were they painted?
Yes, according to IMDb, there was at least 15. What was the number staggering? But it's literally something like 1,500 it's like almost 1,000 rats were shipped in, and he tried to have the crew paint all of them gray.
Yeah.
Because he tried to paint all of them gray. He couldn't get all of them. You still see a few of them that are not gray in there in the back, and he got them there. And animal rights people say that he must have starved those poor things, and they were cannibalizing each other. But Herzog says no, we did everything legit, and he says apparently the rats were much more well behaved than Klaus Kinski.
Well, yeah. So since we were talking about the rat sequences are amazing in here. The one shot where they're just coming off of the boat in buttloads, and they're just sitting around the edge of the shoreline, or the Last Supper sequence is what we call
Oh,
it.
I love that part.
Oh
Yes, I
my
love that.
god!
I
Yeah,
love it. I love it. So like
they're all eating, and the rats are just around, and it's like, dude, this is visually, and they're gray, so they look visually amazing. It's not like if he had done black rats, it would have given it a different feel completely. So
oh
I think,
yeah, oh yeah. I think he made them gray only to kind of. I think he made them to that way so they could be like a like almost like a an extension of of Dracula himself.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of the book too, because in the book, Dracula could turn into hordes of rats. In this movie, the rats are like his army. In fact, Renfield calls it his army is 15,000 strong, and they are hungry, and they are coming with the plague. And that's what they are. They are an army that descends on this poor town and brings the plague. And I think the first rewatch of this I had was like shortly after COVID. So this movie you take has a whole different tone when you watch it in the post-COVID world, because unlike other versions of Dracula, this is probably the only one that examines the idea of vampire as harbinger of the plague.
Mm-hmm.
Because in most vampire movies, the vampire comes in and infects a small group of people with vampirism.
Mm-hmm.
And he maybe kills a few people. But this is probably the first Dracula movie that I could think of where Dracula doesn't just kill 2 or 3 people or vampirizes a couple of them. Dracula kills thousands of people just by being there, just by existing in a civilized world, by traversing from the world of phantoms and bringing his evil, passive evil self into this world. He brings with him death by the thousands.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so fascinating.
Fascinating, but also interesting because you never see any of the deaths. You only hear about it when they're trying to arrest Van Helsing at the end, and they can't find anyone to arrest them because everyone's died of the plague.
Everyone's dead. Yeah, everyone's dead. And like you said, like the plague gets to a point where people start to slowly go insane, and they have a little Last Supper for themselves in the middle of the street with food and the rats just kind of hanging out. And then they have this little dance macabre kind of thing where they're dancing in the middle of the street, and Lucy is just walking through it, and they're like, "Here, come dance with us. We all have the plague. This is our Last Supper." And it's like, we're all going to die anyway. Let's just party.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just like distraught and doesn't know what to do. It's like her faith, her everything is just slipping. And I think that's part of what makes that, at least the third act of this movie, all that more interesting. Granted, the drama of that stuff, you kind of have to infer. You have to kind of penetrate it a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because Herzog, for all his strengths, he's, at least at this time, he wasn't really that interested in getting Oscar-winning performances of nuance out of his actors. Maybe he's wasted all that effort trying to corral Kinski. I don't know. But yeah, it's oh, before we forget, ladies and gentlemen, talking about Kinski and his acting prowess, my favorite scene I alluded to is when back in Transylvania, back in the castle, when they have that moment that every Dracula movie has to have, where Harker is eating and cuts himself. Mm-hmm. And he's got, blood. And Dracula takes and sucks the blood. And then, depending on which version you see, he either, in the original, he bites him, because it's Renfield, not Harker in that version. And the Bela Lugosi version, obviously. But in other versions, different things happen. In this version, Kinski kind of plays it like a heroin addict, basically, who's jonesing for a hit. And he sees it. He's like, "Oh, come here. Let me. It is the oldest remedy."
Yeah, the oldest remedy.
He's like, "Oh no, it's okay. It's nothing. It's nothing." And kudos to Bruno Gantz. He's having a genuine a genuine human realistic reaction to this freaking weirdo who's being weird in front of him. He's like, "Yeah, no, it's okay." And then what happens next is amazing, because Kinski just kind of shrinks into the corner and tries to control himself for a hot second and then just explodes. And he goes, "Ah," and just goes after Bruno Ganz. And he flings a chair to the right. And it's not a showy action. It's an action of somebody improvising. It's something they clearly did not plan for. And what sells it, it's like he chases him slowly, stalks him like a cat. And what makes it amazing is the fear on Bruno Ganz's face, which is real. You could see it because he's looking backwards. He looked back at two spots, because over there to the right, that was where Herzog was, and to the back left, that's where the camera guy was. Because according to Gantz's account of that set, he really genuinely thought Kinski had gone insane and was going to kill him. He really thought Kinski had gotten so into his method acting in that moment that he had snapped, and he was looking at Herzog like, nine cuts? Herzog, he's really going to kill me? He's not acting anymore?
Oh my God.
And since there's like no dialogue in that first little bit, I wonder if that's the same in both the English and the German version. I'm not sure. But like it's one take where they go from there to the chair. He sits him down in a chair and then seems to compose himself and say, "Let's sit by the fire a while. The sun won't be up for a few more hours."
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I'll have to watch the German version to see how different. Now I'll have to watch the German version to see how different they actually are.
I think it would probably play better in German for a modern audience, especially because, I mean, again, it's supposed to be set in Germany anyway. And I feel like for those actors whom German is their heart language, their grown up language, I feel like they might give performances that are a little bit more life, shall we say, to them. I don't know. Or maybe Herzog tired everybody else out too, just to get that same kind of tone, that sort of slightly detached tone that a lot of people have in this movie. Unless you're Renfield, in which case you're just freaking nuts.
Yeah.
And have a cage full of flies that you never eat, but they're just there.
A big case full of flies. Oh, like Jesus, dude. Are you supposed to eat them?
I know, right? And let's not forget how like weird the castle itself is. And again, how there's this beautiful beat in there that I didn't notice until I rewatched it. There's so many little moments in this movie that I just forgot about.
Yeah, same
here. Like, yeah, and I'm like, wow, that's weird. Like, there's a little boy and I want to get your take on this because I have theories.
Okay.
There's a little boy, a dark-haired boy in Dracula's castle in this movie. No other version has this boy. He's just a little boy who plays the violin badly. And that's all he does. He's just there. He just shows up, and he shows up only in the daytime, it seems.
Yeah.
So it's like they never explain who he is. There's no indication whatsoever. Now, according to IMDb, this is supposed to be a ghost.
Oh, that's not what I would have thought at all.
See, that's why I want to hear your interpretation. But because according to IMDb, this is like the ghost of a boy, because the castle itself exists in the world of dreams, the world of phantoms. So it's haunted. And that's really interesting to think about, that Dracula's castle is not really Dracula's castle. It's just where Dracula lives. It's haunted with many different kinds of phantoms. Dracula is just one of the many things that stalk the corridors of that castle that seems to not make any sense, because Harker tries to get out of it several times and finds that it's like a maze where none of it makes sense. He even tries to, when he sees Dracula get out there with his coffins, he makes a little rope out of, the cliched rope of sheets and descends the wall and drops. And I think one of the most hilarious moments in Herzog's movies, where he drops and then the next day you see Harker lying on the ground, maybe dead, and all you see is this little boy with his violin going like playing his death march.
And you know what? I never thought about ghosts in this place. Mostly because if I was to think that the place was haunted, I would have liked to have seen like other ghosts to indicate that something to back that up. I kind of just looked at it as a gypsy child, like most of all the other Dracula versions have the gypsies who are the only people who work and know of the castle because he has people who work or servants who do all of his bidding. Um, in every version of Dracula.
Yeah, so that's what I was wondering about too, because like another thing I realized on this rewatch that I never realized before is that this is probably one of the only versions of Dracula where there are no Dracula's brides.
No, I remember that when I was rewatching. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. There's none of that. This is a very
There's none of that. There's none of that. There's just this boy, and that kind of puts a little disturbing because if you don't buy the idea that he's a ghost, I like the idea that he's a ghost because then that makes you think, what happened to him? Is this a kid that Dracula killed? And that Dracula's just haunted by the ghosts of his victims that he didn't turn into a vampire for all eternity? And that's part of his punishment for being a vampire? That's kind of a cool idea. But if he's a flesh and blood kid, which the only thing that makes me think that is the fact that he only appears in the daylight.
Mm-hmm.
If he's a flesh and blood kid and there are no Dracula's brides in this castle, what function does this kid perform for Dracula? Unless he is what you would call a familiar, which is to say Dracula takes this poor little boy who cannot leave this castle and just slowly drains him night after night when he needs a little snack. That this poor kid is basically like hostage to Lord Dracula, and when he leaves, I guess he's stuck there because he's still there when Dracula leaves and Harker's still there. So like it's almost a kind of subtle almost allegory for pedophilia almost, you know. It's weird to think of it that way and gross.
Well, it's never going to be weird no matter how you think about it because you put too much thought into it. Yeah, why is this child here? What function does he play for the place, the castle, and what function does he play for Dracula himself? I don't think Dracula, the way the Nosferatu Dracula is in this, would need a familiar. I mean, in theory, if they showed a lot more gypsies inside the castle or working around the castle, my theory would be better. But as of right now, I just think it was Werner Herzog just throwing in a little visual tidbit that probably there's stuff that was cut out that would explain that more, or like in other films of his, he throws in some weird shit just because he thought it was cool, or it might be like the son of a friend of his that he just put in the movie. It could be any of those because that's what Werner Herzog would do.
Yeah, I mean that's what he does, like to kind of make you wonder like why is this there. I mean he does that in lots of, like he did that with a chicken in a movie I can't remember the name of, but it was about like a bank robber or something. It was one of his few movies that was shot in Germany, set in America, and I cannot for life me remember the name of it. But like he loved, like at the end the guy goes to this like tourist trap area and there's like this chicken dancing in a thing, and he thought it was the weirdest, interesting, funnest thing that he could find, and he just filmed that chicken, and he did the same thing in the Nick Cage movie, the Bad Lieutenant movie. There's iguanas that are just sitting there in one scene where like Val Kilmer is just like on a stakeout and Cage just walks in and he's like, why are there iguanas here? And Kilmer's like, what iguanas? And at that moment you realize, oh, Cage is hallucinating these iguanas. And then Herzog just stays on these iguanas for a good long time. So maybe that's it. The kid is an iguana, basically.
Sorry. I started to try and figure out that Werner Herzog film that I was thinking of, and then I realized how many films of his lately that I have not seen yet. I was like, Jesus.
I honestly, I think the most recent one I have seen is that Nick Cage one he did. Oh, by the way, I found it. 11,000 rats in this movie. 11,000. So if you, ladies and gentlemen out there, have a thing against rats, if they creep you out or gross you out, this might not be the movie for you. Because it's a lot of them.
Well, I
Also, I think it's interesting before we come into a landing here. Um, we mentioned the climax as we build to it, where Lucy figures out that the only way she's going to save Gelatin, who is now slowly becoming a vampire by the end of the movie, is that she has to kill Dracula. But the only way she knows how to do that, because she read the little vampire book, that Gelatin also read, that the sun can destroy the vampire. But it's interesting that in this version, the sun doesn't really kill him. It just kind of sends him into a fit and paralyzes him so that somebody can come along, until now useless Van Helsing comes along and stakes him through the heart off screen.
Yes, off screen. This is not a very violent film.
No, it isn't.
It isn't PG.
It is a PG rated movie where Kinski literally cops a feel on poor Isabella Gianni while she is sacrificing herself on the bed, which is one of the few things that, again, Herzog remade from the original. Except in this version, obviously, Kinski decides to get handsy with her, and his hand is gigantic on her poor chest. It looks even bigger. But weirdly, like, I've seen another picture of Kinski, and that man had huge monkey-like hands. But the makeup makes him look thin and long and spindly. It's really amazing what they do with it. But yeah, so she consents to this, and basically puts some, like, again, we're in spoiler territory here, folks, because one of the reasons I love this instead of Murnau's version is how different the third act is, and the twists that Herzog adds to the story that I think are pretty cool. How she consents to the Count coming in to bite her, and we assume turn into a vampire. Like, she knows that she has a power over him. She knows that if she lets him, the Count will have no choice but to come and take her blood. And she counts on that and keeps him there even as the sun comes up. And it's pretty beautiful, again, the way he does it. And yet, even after all of that, I guess this is just Herzog's kind of pessimism, his nihilism, his atheism, his general not wanting to have a happy ending in almost anything he does.
Yeah.
In her efforts to save Jonathan, she can't save anybody, apparently, because he becomes a vampire anyway.
Yeah. Which I had about when I rewatched it. I forgot, oh shit, that's how this movie ended.
Yeah. It totally like punched you in the face. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. That's how this ends. And he does it in a very witty sort of way. And, he starts this movie on horseback, riding off into the distance. He ends this movie on horseback, riding off into the distance.
Yes, I noticed that. And it's a very beautiful shot, too.
It is. You can see, like, the shadows of the clouds moving really fast across this desolate landscape as he goes off to bring the plague somewhere else. I don't know what we were supposed to infer with that. People online have speculated that basically, like, the spirit of Dracula went into Harker's body and reincarnated in him, because they're trying to factor in, like you said, because you brought up my lead, is that this movie had a sequel. It was probably this might have been in Germany. This might have been one of the most successful Herzog movies ever, because it got a sequel. Not directed by Herzog.
I don't think it's a real sequel. I think they just took Kinski's Dracula and made their own movie to it. It's kind of like when Christopher Lee played Dracula in, I think, the Mexican version of Count Dracula or something, where he
Spanish.
Okay, so it's not really a sequel. It's just like this offshoot movie. That's how I take this movie, but I've never seen it, so I can't tell you.
What's funny? Yeah, I've seen some of it. I stopped watching it after. You know what? That movie also has Klaus Kinski in it. He plays Renfield in that movie.
I haven't seen that one either.
And don't worry, it's terrible. He is awful as Renfield. He doesn't say anything. He refused to say his dialogue. Kinski hated playing Renfield in that movie, I guess because he really wanted to play Dracula, and he got his wish a couple of years later.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah, weird. So he's like the only mute Renfield in the history of Dracula movies. It's bizarre. But anyway,
Tubi. I'm gonna see it eventually. It's on. They're both on Tubi.
Yeah, both on Tubi. Yep. Yeah, that was Jesus Franco did that Dracula movie.
Yeah,
and a bunch of really bad werewolf movies.
I haven't caught up with those either. He's not. I don't think any of his films are actually on our watch list for the podcast. But I don't know if anyone here of our guests who are our special guests who are actually fans of his or have watched enough of his films to be able to talk about them. Because I surely haven't. I've seen random ones. I've not delved deep into his films like I have Werner Herzog's. So
no, me neither. Me neither. Although there are a couple. There's a French guy, Jean. Oh crap, I can't remember his name, but he's like a French horror director who usually does like lesbian vampire movies. But he did a couple horror movies that aren't lesbian vampire movies that are really good. One of them's called The Iron Rose, and I'd really like to talk about that because that was really interesting. Jean Roland, Jean Roland, that's his name.
Yeah,
he's interesting. I'd like to talk to him about him sometime. But like we said, this movie did have a sequel that's not really a sequel. In the same way, I would say that Once Upon a Time in Mexico is a sequel to Desperado, which it's not really, but it has the same character. So it has kind of a spaghetti western type thing with
no, that's more like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, where he takes the story and then kind of redoes it because he has more money.
Yes, indeed. I mean, like I said, I have no desire to see Nosferatu in Venice, which is what it's officially called. Although it does have what's his name? It does have Christopher Plummer as a Van Helsing type figure. And then later on, he would go play Van Helsing in Dracula 2000.
Oh, so, God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's not good. But that's this movie. And I think it's amazing. But I can see how upon a rewatch that there are things that probably don't work as much. Like I said, this movie excels in the moments between the moments. Where it doesn't excel is in the dialogues moments, except for that, scene with Harker and Dracula where they're having the blood thing and he almost kills Bruno Ganz. That scene really works because how unhinged Kinski becomes. But other than that, like Fulci, Herzog never really, until way later in his career, learned how to direct actors in a naturalistic sense. He kind of was more interested in making a mood. And your mileage for this movie may vary depending on how much you love that mood. Mm-hmm. No matter, how much you are willing to give yourself over to this dream world of Herzog's, where you are staring at the catacombs of your own demise and pondering what the abyss will be like. He likes saying the word abyss a lot, I notice. So I guess I don't really have a Schwarzenegger alternator for this, which is
you might come up with something different because you haven't had those in a while.
Well, here's the thing: it's like I tried. You would think it'd be such an easy target because Herzog is so self-serious when he's not being funny, and he's also German. You would think that there would be plenty of opportunities for him to come in as like Van Helsing, the scene we don't see, where he's like, here, Dracula, you've got a bit of wood. Oh, here's a bit of morning wood for you. Something like that.
Oh, Jesus.
Maybe we'll take, but what I thought about doing, but I was unsuccessful. And maybe this is indicative of the technology, the limits of the technology. I tried to go to ChatGPT and type in Werner Herzog reciting Arnold Schwarzenegger lines.
Interesting.
And what?
I said interesting.
and I was unable to do it in time for the podcast. So it's a bit anticlimactic. Maybe my wife has ChatGPT on another laptop. Maybe I'll try it there and see because there's so much video of Herzog his narration and the masterclass and stuff. ChatGPT's got to be able to take something from all of that loneliness and despair, and make some kind of monologue that would sound hilariously incoherent. because I hate AI.
Well, also keep in mind that Herzog is also an actor, so he's done a lot of movies as well.
Oh yeah, he's famous for being the guy who basically wanted to eat Baby Yoda in the season 1 of The Mandalorian.
Oh Jesus! No, I remember him for the other horror film that he did do as an actor, which we will hopefully get to. Which
what was that?
Incident at Loch Ness. Did you ever see that?
Oh yeah,
where he's playing himself and shooting a documentary on Loch Ness. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I thought
okay.
Great. You've never seen it?
I never saw it. I thought it was something he directed. I didn't know he just acted in it. Oh.
No. The writer of the X-Men 2 and 3 or something. I forgot his name. He wrote this movie and had Werner Herzog be in it. It's a Loch. And it was absolutely brilliant. I was just it's so freaking funny. Zach Penn.
What is it?
Zach Penn, who wrote.
Oh yeah, you're right. That name does sound familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. So he did this movie. It's so hilarious because they're trying to. Werner Herzog obviously doesn't think he wants to do a real movie, and Zach Penn is trying to create all these incidents that are fake. And so they get into like a huge clash over this until something actually happens because it's a found footage movie. It's done like a found footage movie. I absolutely love this movie. It's so good, and it reminds me of how good an actor he can be because he was also in. What was he in? Was he in? Shit. Wasn't he the villain in a Jack Reacher movie?
Yes, he was.
Yeah, and then I think it was the other. Yeah, I guess he just likes being villains or something.
Well, it's that German thing, man. I mean, he's German, and he's got that voice, and he's got that severe face. I mean, that's just ideal for playing a German bad guy. I mean, Kinski had the same problem. I mean, I can't buy Klaus Kinski as anything benevolent, like ever. That face is just the face of evil. I mean, come on.
Yes. Well, I'll have to put that on the list, and I'll have to make you watch it. It's on Tubi. I didn't know where it was until I just looked it up. I love that movie. I think it's an underrated movie because it's done in that found footage type of thing. And I'm pretty sure it didn't do well at the box office or any of that crap.
No. But now that you mentioned, I do remember when it came out, and I remember seeing like bits of it in the trades, like an Entertainment Weekly or something. But yeah, I'll have to check that out. And also, like, since we've come to that point, you're talking about rating. What do we rate this movie?
So, for everyone out there who's listening, we rate the movies now from 1 to 5. 5 being horrible. 5 being horrible. No, 1 being horrible. 5
Reverse that.
5 being absolutely brilliant and Oscar worthy. Where would you place this film? To the Vampire on this.
And like, what object do we pick to represent the star rating? Because we don't use stars here.
This one's going to be really hard for me because I don't.
Well, for me, it's easy. For me, like, there's not one object. I mean, granted, I could be very artsy and pick the locket, that marvelous and terrible object that of which, by the way, has her picture and a lock of her hair in it. I don't know if you noticed that. So like you could clone Mina or Lucy from this thing in theory, but for me it's the rats. So because they bring the plague, they are the armies of the undead, of the vampire, and so for me I feel like the painted gray rats of this movie are the defining object, the marvelous and terrible object of this movie. So I will rate it 4 painted gray rats, well-behaved rats, out of 5.
Okay, so everyone out there, when I came into this film, it keeps changing for me. Originally, when I first saw it, I gave it a 9 out of 10 stars. That's what I have on IMDb when I freaking did this. And then when I rewatched it, I was ready to come on here and say it's probably a 2 out of 5, mostly because I like the visuals and the music, but I didn't really care much for anything else. But after our talk today, Thomas, I decided I'm going to give it 4 Last Suppers with 10,000 rats. Mostly because after our discussion, this is a film that is actually visually stunning. It is visually magnificent. Even though the performances are a kind of here and there, it works for this film because of how jarring some of the stuff in the film is, despite the fact that most of the visuals are beautiful visuals for a Dracula movie. And I still absolutely love the score. The score, my opinions on the score has never changed. I love the score of this movie, and it makes this film, despite its flaws in terms of the plot. Now, the plot really, for me, doesn't really make as much. It doesn't matter as much because everyone knows this general story of Dracula. So I can deal with that whole those issues, but the Last Supper scene adds to the whole fantasy element, the phantom element that we've just talked about, all that type of stuff, which heightens this film.
And I would argue that we all know the story, but I feel like that this version changes it enough, especially in that third act, to be its own thing.
Yes, yeah, I will agree with that. I think that if you've seen a lot of Dracula films, by the third act of this one, it changes enough stuff in it to make it different, very different. It's not what you're expecting, because I had forgotten that the Bruno Gans Harker was gonna be a vampire. Dude, I completely I was like, oh shit, that's how this movie ended. It's like I completely forgot how the movie ended. I was like, oh, damn. And then he rides off in the sunset, which is actually, like we said, it was how it began. This is how it ends, and he's just taking the plague to another town.
Yeah, although it does beg the question: if he's a vampire now, how is he riding in the daylight?
That comes into play with what you were saying, where the sunlight isn't what really killed Dracula.
It just paralyzes him, so that you can kill him.
But that's all part of the phantom aspects, the visual aspects. It's not so much worried about the logic aspects.
It's dream logic.
Well, consider, I mean, if you've seen Possession with Ajani, you know that logic doesn't always play a role. So I'm perfectly fine with forgiving logic. And Possession is a movie where the visuals and the performances are also stand out, but the logic is all over the fucking place. That's not a film where you're going in there knowing the logic is not going to keep you, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's how I feel about this film now. I think out of all of Werner Herzog's films, and unfortunately for his documentaries, he doesn't use these film cinematography and film qualities as well because he's trying to be more realistic.
Although sometimes I think he does film some of these movies like a documentary.
Oh yeah. I think
like there's parts of this movie that, because there's so much handheld stuff, that feel like a documentary. There's parts of, like, I think my favorite of his movies, Gary the Wrath of God. That whole movie, especially in the first act, feels just like he sent a camera crew back in time to follow these conquistadors through the Andes.
Yeah.
Because everything is handheld, everything is gritty, everything is dirty, everything is just in your face. It feels like a documentary. He films it like a documentary. Yeah. So I feel like what's great about Herzog in that respect is, like, the normal rules of narrative filmmaking, he's always felt they do not apply to me.
Mm-hmm.
Why should I follow those rules? You must learn to break them,
No, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And that's one of the things I kind of forgot until we had our conversation. I was like, oh yeah, that is the style. He doesn't really play by the rules. He kind of just says, fuck it, I'm going to break every rule I want to make a visually stunning, interesting film.
Yeah,
or they might not be. But I find this one very visually stunning and very interesting to talk about. So there you go.
So my final thought on this is something that occurred to me was I was listening to another podcast. They were talking about Robert Eggers' version, which sadly I still have not seen. I want to see it. No. You haven't seen it? Okay, good. Good. We're both equally ignorant at this point. Good. Good. I really want to because I like Robert Eggers stuff. I don't love, but aside, The Lighthouse I really loved. The Witch I also really loved. I didn't love it as much as I thought I would, but I loved it. The Lighthouse is so bizarre. I love the bizarreness of it. But there is a criticism of his version of Nosferatu that I think is interesting and applies to this movie, which is that there are some who criticize Eggers' version by saying, without spoilers, I will say that it's said that in the third act of his Nosferatu that Eggers seems so beholden to Murnau's vision of the story that he kind of loses himself as an artist. He kind of just becomes sort of kind of like an artist who tries to imitate another great artist. Kind of like when, and they do this with varying results. You have Spielberg imitating Kubrick with AI, and then you have what?
That movie's horrible.
We'll talk about that at some other point. Or some other, or other examples where people try to emulate, Hitchcock, or try to emulate, Tim
Brian De Palma.
Brian De Palma, yeah, and you can make the argument though that that's Brian De Palma's style, but then you can make the argument at what point is he Brian De Palma, and what point is he just color Hitchcock? So you can make the same argument, maybe. I know, again, I haven't seen it, with Eggers' version of Nosferatu. For all it may be magnificent, but the question is how much of it is him and how much of it is Murnau. At least this movie, Werner Herzog's Nosferatu der Vampyre, or Phantom der Nacht, whatever version you see it in, he does homage Murnau. He straight up recreates a couple, not many, but a couple of shots from the original. And he takes the basic story flow, or the story structure of the original of Murnau's version. But in the end, at no point do we ever feel like this is anything but a Werner Herzog movie.
Mm-hmm.
It is 100. Every single frame of this movie is 150% 70s era Werner Herzog. Yeah. And there is no doubt about that, no matter how you feel about this. And I think I will. I probably should rate this in the bleakometer too.
Yeah, go ahead.
1 out of 5. How bleak is it, Mr. Kevin, Mr. Tom? Well, let's find out. Wow. I would say this movie is, it's got too much lighthearted, dark humor in it to be a 5. Yeah. So I'm thinking it's probably like a very soft 4 out of 5 on the bleakometer.
I'm going to say 3 only because actually it should be higher than that, but I like to say 3 because it kind of ends the way you think the characters wanted to end, except for Harker, but then Harker just seems to have to relish the ideal of he's a vampire. I'm going to write that in Sunset now. I'm going to have like.
Well, if you think about it, though, that's super bleak because, he's running off into an eternity of living in the darkness, staring into the void, as Dracula said that he would do, and also it's like Mina tried everything, ultimately sacrificing her life to try and save his, and in the end, nobody saves anybody in this movie. Nope. That is bleak.
Why do we pick these bleak movies for me and you to watch?
I don't know, dude. It just happens that way. That's why we put them on the bleakometer and find out how bleak is it. Although, like I said, it's not a feel bad movie. I don't think it's gonna ruin your day. I don't know, Salo or something similar from that time period. But yeah, it's a feel. Well, you know what it is? It's a meditation on death. And I think that it'd be appropriate to end with a quote from Mr. Werner Herzog about death. He says, "Death is overwhelming. Eventually we all die. Stars fade and reel in confusion. Time passes in blindness. Rivers flow without knowing their course. Only death is cruelly sure.
All right. And with that, I would like to thank you, Thomas, for joining us for Conversations in Horror. That is a great quote to end this episode on. And for everyone out there, thank you so much for listening to our conversation about Nosferatu, the Vampyre, from Werner Herzog from 1979. With that, make sure to check out our previous episodes and to make sure when you go to your favorite podcast app to like, subscribe, do that thing you do with your favorite podcast, as we are available on all major podcast apps, Spotify, and YouTube. From everyone here at Something Wicked Entertainment, have a pleasant day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.